what does a typical day look like for you, Danya? I mean, how do you manage to keep your head above water? How does this work, right?
Whew. The great thing about being in news is there is no typical day, right? Even at the leadership level,
Yeah,
right? Uh,
yeah.
you have to be ready to roll with the punches and jump on things when they happen.
Writing a newsletter is tough. It takes discipline. Writing 6 local newsletters takes a totally different act of dedication. Dania Henninger knows this. She has done this before at the Billy Penn media outlet at Philadelphia. She knows how to grow from 0 to 40K, all without paid ads. And she currently leads the editorial newsroom at a multi local newsletter setup at Technically. I invited her to the podcast and I wanted to make sure that she's able to spill as much as she can without giving all of it away. So, Dania, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome, awesome. And go ahead, you were about to say something?
Well, what I wanted to say is that I'll spill as much as possible. I'm a believer in sharing and collaboration. Like for the newsletter and the news industry, there's no secrets, right? We can all thrive.
Absolutely. A rising tide lifts all boats. I keep saying that saying on the Letter Stack podcast, so it applies equally well here. Yeah. Now, I know we are here to talk about the multi-local newsletter setup at Technically, Danya. But before we get into that, please, for the love of God, please share the secrets behind how you grew the Billy Penn newsletter from, I believe you grew it from 8,000 to 40,000, somewhere along that range, and all without paid ads. Yeah, if I understand it correctly.
Right, without paid ads and without paid acquisition. Right, we
Wow.
didn't buy any of the email addresses, so it was all organic growth. Um, the secret, the top level secret, and what I'm searching for at Technically, is is organic growth by getting referrals. People started forwarding our newsletter to one another, and that was our main source of growth, right? Because no matter how much marketing you do, or ads, or solicitations, or sign up at an event, the best signal for somebody to sign up for a newsletter is if somebody they know and trust says, "Hey, you might like this newsletter," and
Yeah,
that's what happened at Billy Penn.
awesome. And this is over what period of time, Danya?
Yeah, so I mean, it was about 5 years, so it wasn't a nothing, but it was steady growth. We had a couple of spurts. We were early on the COVID reporting trend. So in a big growth spurt came in 2019, early 2020, when I think February of that year, before the U.S. really generally realized it was a big deal, we had a special section dedicated to what is Philadelphia. We were in Philadelphia, and what is Philadelphia doing about it, and continued that section and updated it daily with stats, and people started forwarding it through there. But additionally, we would put in something in the newsletter that you could have found online if you went searching, but you couldn't find it anywhere else easily. Um,
Right.
the example, people used to say, "Oh yeah, put the weather in there because it's something that changes every day, and people will open it and look for the weather." And like, there's a lot of newsletters that do that, but
Right.
come on, you can get the weather anywhere. So
Absolutely.
we sought out, what we found at Billy Penn was the mayor's schedule. Like, the mayor sends out their schedule at like 5:30 p.m. The press office would send it out every day. Here's what the official mayor's schedule is for the next day. And we would turn that into a section. We called it Mayor Watch, but really all we did was report on what it said in that press release. Now, somebody could have gone and found that, but it
Right.
became a section that people were used to up, and they thought, well, gosh, we should know what our mayor's doing every day. I wouldn't otherwise have thought of that.
Right, right. And I'm actually a very big fan of you talking about experimentation in your newsletters too. And I guess you continued that to this day at Technically as well. And I think that this is a very nuanced niche that people don't touch. They stick to the tried and tested sections, classifieds, then breaking news, then an editorial piece, and then they go to curated set of news articles. But I believe, for example, I haven't seen SEC filings in any other newsletter apart from the DC one that technically puts out, and that struck out as very unique to me. So is there a way you actually test out experimenting news sections in each newsletter, and what's your process like for that?
Yeah, definitely a test and learn, right? You want to set a certain amount of time for your pilot of whatever the section is. We tested it's helpful at technically one of the value props. One of the things we have is we have a regional newsletter that's similar in multiple different regions. So what we did is we tested. We could a kind of A/B test. We said, okay, in two of our regional newsletters, let's test a section that's SEC filings. And technically, we cover a lot of startups, and that's why it's relevant. It was SEC filings of fundraises, Series A, seed round, etc.
Right.
And again, that's all publicly available, but it takes a little bit of work to go get it. So we curated it and put it in one place. So in the DC newsletter and the Philadelphia newsletter, we tested a little section that was SEC filings. We piloted it for, I think we said 8 weeks. And then in our other newsletter, 2 of our other newsletters, we did a section that was AI and local. Because we would report on AI regulation, AI policy, AI companies, but we just said local, let's separate it out as a separate section. And then you have to decide what the metrics are that you want to, what I was hoping that it would be forwards, that people would forward the newsletter because they would be like, oh, here, it's the SEC filing. The other thing you want to see is completion of the newsletter, satisfaction. You want somebody to open a newsletter and be satisfied with it. Right, and not think oh gosh, there's too much, because then if they think, oh my god, there's too much in there, or it didn't have what I wanted, they're just not going to open it. It's going to sit there in the newsletter, and you're going to have a bad open rate. And so those are 2 of the metrics that we use to judge when we pilot something in a newsletter.
Right, and that's absolutely refreshing compared to the open rates and the click-through rates that we usually hear newsletter operators talk about. So I believe that's a true test of the quality of the content in the newsletter. Now, I know we briefly touched upon the real volume of the newsroom that you handle, but would you mind talking about the different newsletters you are right now leading at technically, and what's the volume of the subscriber rate at each one of these?
Yeah, altogether we have about across 7, and we're about to launch our 8th. Wait, maybe it's 7, and we're about to launch our 8th. We have about 35,000 subscribers, so it's not that much. We're a very niche topic. It's local innovation ecosystems or regional innovation ecosystems. So tech and startups and how it affects the local economies in different places, as opposed to the national tech and startup world, which is mostly focused on Silicon Valley in New York. So, but this is happening everywhere, and it's one of the best ways for regions to have equitable growth. So that's why we cover it. So 4 and about to be 5, because we're launching in Louisiana right now. We're about to launch a Louisiana newsletter. So 5 of them are regional, about a specific region. So Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, DC, Maryland, and Louisiana. And those all have a very similar format, but a different reporter writes each one. And so it's their voice. They own that newsletter. They all have different voices. They have the same sections, except when we A/B test different ones. But they are very different from one another, because each reporter is asked to please own it, give it some personality. Then we have a newsletter that is our CEO's newsletter, which is about, it's a very niche, even nichier, about place-based economic development and ecosystem building. So that he's speaking to the people who are making this happen in those regions. The Builders newsletter by Chris Wing. And then we have a newsletter called This Week in Jobs, which is job listings in the tech and startup space. And one of our reporters writes that every week, and it's got a funny, themed top, and there's a GIF that leads it, because job hunting is a rough, that's on purpose. The tone is on purpose. If people are hunting for jobs and want this newsletter, it's not easy out there. So there's a fun top, themed, and then a few headlines, and then listings, actual listings to job curated. A person curates them. and that's This Week in Jobs, Twidge, we call it. And then the last one, which we've just launched, is called Innovation Wire, and it's by Katie Malone, one of our editors, who's going to kind of draws trends from all of the newsletters. And she's a really good writer. It's her voice. And we figured that one, like, it's not regional, it's not very niche. That one could appeal to more people. We just launched it, so it's got like 100 subscribers so far. But like last 3 days ago, we launched it. But that one we see could grow.
Right. I actually caught the announcement by Katie, and you reposted it obviously on LinkedIn. But that's on Beehive. Are all the other newsletters on Beehive as well?
Not yet. That one's on Beehive. So we're testing out that other platform. Our other newsletters right now are run through HubSpot, which is our CRM, like customer relations management tool. It's like where we keep all of our contacts for our whole business, right? So the business side of our organization, which is my colleague, the CEO and his team, use that. And so we also use it because it's expensive. It's a Salesforce for startups, essentially. Yeah.
Right. Awesome. And I understand, this is just a bit sidebar on the jobs part that you talked about. For most of the newsletter operators that I talk to, the classifieds or the jobs section is usually a huge draw for that newsletter, especially on the web part of their newsletters. Is it true for Technically as well? I'm guessing it is. It's probably our third largest newsletter. So we do have a little bit of subscriber overlap, but not too much, but some. And so the Twidge, the This Week in Jobs, is our third largest newsletter, I believe. And we do have a jobs section, a small jobs section in each of the newsletters, but it's really not a big draw. It's actually not in the regional newsletters. It's not that big a draw. It's at the bottom because not a lot of people click on it. It's there more as like we can sell sponsorships, but we don't that much. People don't really. That's not where it is right now. Actually, in tech hiring is down, so that it's a sign of the times a little bit. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess it's true in 2026, and we are just 1 month past. So I hope the year is better as it goes along. But one thing that I do want to touch upon is you touched upon audience overlap. And I don't know, I think it's a mixed bag. I've always believed it's a mixed bag to combine two kinds of audiences for a newsletter cohort. But do you think it's an advantage? It's a disadvantage? Do people in Philadelphia or Maryland also subscribe to the AI newsletter? If yes, how does it help you understand, or is it an advantage for you to be able to blend in audiences here?
It's a great question. There are some people who subscribe to the This Week in Jobs and a regional newsletter, but there are also people who subscribe to the regional newsletters in multiple regions because, in the U.S., one of the great things is we can do business across all of the regions at will, right? And so it might behoove somebody in Pittsburgh to know what D.C. is doing, especially in the AI space, right? So I think it's a value to them. And we have quite a few people who do subscribe to like multiple of the ecosystem newsletters, or they will subscribe to what our CEO's newsletter and whatever ecosystem they're in. A cool thing is with our regional newsletters, audience, like our subscribers have told us sometimes it's the only local news that they read.
Interesting.
Because especially in the startup world, you get so focused, like you don't have time, you're doing all the jobs, and you're going to cover, you hear national news that filters in whatever the president is doing, etc. Yeah. You can't help it. And then you might read your industry news, like what's going on in the robotics sector, but you don't have time to read other stuff. So technically it's that blend. And a lot of people use these newsletters to like stay tethered with their community.
To go out and touch grass, if I might put it that way.
Connection. I mean, that is the other thing that brought from Billy Penn to Technically is like the goal of the newsletter is to connect people with one another, with who else is doing what out there in our region, in our ecosystem. Connection, and not connection to us. We want to help people connect with one another. And IRL events, in-person events are one way, but I think newsletters are another way.
True. And that's something that I've always seen you talk about, you know, probably by intent that, newsletters you feel are the connective tissue. And I feel, let's say you're trying to open a newsletter in a congested metro like DC, there are already a lot of local newsletters, already a lot of nationwide newsletters as well. Would you say that the connective tissue intent is what makes your newsletter unique if you were to stand out in a crowded metro like DC, for example?
I think the connection and connective intent, I think the connective intent drives what the newsletter is. I don't know that it's that obvious to the end user.
Right.
Hopefully, what makes it unique is a combination of the voice, the accessibility, and the subject matter.
Right.
In Technically's case, a lot of what we cover is not covered elsewhere, or it's not collected in one place elsewhere. Like a business journal in our whatever region might have some of the stories, and occasionally the paper of record will have a story about the startups. But the early stage startups, the accelerators, the incubators, the pitch competitions that are held at the university level, the workforce development programs that are partnering with the local government to get the unemployment backlog down. Like, other people
Right.
have not covered that. Maybe here's a good example in Delaware, where we have a reporter who contributes. It's part of the greater Philly ecosystem, so they don't have their own newsletter right now, but
Okay.
just wrote a story. It was in the Philly newsletter of a Delaware workforce development program, like coding boot camp, helped the Delaware government cut their unemployment backlog in half. So the unemployment backlog had been hanging around since COVID. All states have this huge unemployment backlog. Our state systems were not ready.
Right.
Delaware is a small state, so it had still about 8,000 people, 7,000 people who hadn't gotten their checks. And these are people who need money to live, and
For sure.
childcare and rent, and they hadn't gotten their checks. And so the state partnered with this workforce development program called Code Differently, brought in a bunch of their grads who used that software engineering problem-solving mindset to cut that in half. Now, cutting the backlog in half was covered by Business Journal or Business Report or whatever, but the connection of how it was done was not covered anywhere.
Right. On the ground. Right.
On the ground. It's like almost like a community newspaper for this community. And that's where I think the niches are. I think niche newsletters are the thing, but not niche newsletters necessarily with like a thought leadership niche. That's what I see a lot on like Substack, and I think that's getting crowded. How much thought leadership is there? There's infinite, obviously, wonderful, glad that the platonic realm is infinite.
Right.
but like stuff that's on the ground, that's real, that like business transaction that affects your everyday life, they're find a niche there and you have something.
For sure. And that actually is a great segue into what I wanted to ask you next. I know it's a lot of editorial responsibility, and it's a lot of mind shifting, I would say, or a mindset shifting exercise for you to stay on top of so many different niches and localities and metros. And I know you told that each one is being led by a separate editor who actually leads that particular city's newsletter. But what does a typical day look like for you, Danya? I mean, how do you manage to keep your head above water? How does this work, right?
Ooh. The great thing about being in news is there is no typical day, right? Even at the leadership level,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You have to be ready to roll with the punches and jump on things when they happen. And even though I have an editor to help with that, and reporters who help with that,
Right.
you got to be flexible, right? So that's I credit, Slack. We use a lot of Slack. We check in the morning. This is something I started back at Billy Penn, and instead of a daily news meeting, fine. If you have a big news organization, that's fine. But if you have a smaller news org, we're 13 people here at Billy Penn. We were 7 at the most. We can do that asynchronously. Like, we don't have to
Right.
all get on the phone every morning. And so every
Right.
morning we drop a note in Slack in a public, like in our group channel, so everybody knows what everyone else is doing, right? Even if it's not your direct report or you're not your manager, you know what everyone's up to for that day, or that's the plan. And you can,
Right.
maybe there's overlap, right? So it's
Right.
asynchronous. So there's no, it's that you don't have to be in the same place at the same time, and you can be mobile. You can check in that way. So that's a big part of how I organize my day.
Great.
Um, yeah.
Great.
I'm also a
And
big believer in weekly one-on-one meetings in a newsroom. I think that, like, between an editor and reporter, and I don't mean like the performance review type meeting, but like, let's plan out the week. Let's get together one-on-one and do that meeting.
true. I was about to ask you that. I believe when the cohort of newsletters that you started were daily at a point in time and you shifted to weekly, I'm guessing that must have been a relief in the daily grind. But is there a specific reason or motivation that you dropped it to weekly instead of continuing daily?
There are too many newsletters. There are too many newsletters.
Right.
When Technically was founded by my friend, I didn't work here back in 2009 when it was founded, but I knew Chris Wink when he and two others founded it, and there were not that many newsletters, and daily made total sense, and there was not a, several social media platforms that will give you a stream of constant news all the time.
Right.
So now, it's, especially for a niche beat, it was kind of a struggle for us to fill a daily newsletter. There was plenty there, but, like, what are we really doing? How are we helping cut through the noise? We're adding to the noise, I felt like. Now, when we have them weekly, we can have more of a voice. We can decide what we decide to put in there. It's even more meaningful, I feel like. And our open rates increased when we went to open rates is not our top metric, but certainly something we track, and our open rates increased when we switched to a weekly newsletter.
Interesting. Good to know. Yeah, I've always wondered how do people carry on with the daily newsletter cadence, and I've always been fascinated on how people pull it off. But that's a revelation.
I did it for 6 years at Billy Penn. I was at Billy Penn for 8 years, but I led the newsletter for 6 years, and I press send every day for 6 years on that newsletter. I switched it so I didn't do it on Saturdays after, like, the first 3 years or something. But
Good
it
call.
was a lot. But what keeps you going is that people loved it. People
Right.
absolutely loved it, and that keeps you going.
Right, and that's another point that I've always seen you talk about, that you have always believed in keeping the newsletter self-contained, where even though it's all original reporting, it's all something that you'd probably not get anywhere else, or it's curated enough that you would find this to be the one place to share everything on. You've always believed in keeping it inside the newsletter and not having links go out as other operators would do it. Is there a reason behind the thesis that you've held on to, Danya?
A newsletter is a thing in and of itself. It's almost like the old newspaper or magazine, right?
Right.
It should not necessarily be a conversion vehicle. That's just marketing. That makes it marketing. But
Right.
newsletter publishing, it's a thing. And I used to at Billy Penn, we used to get a lot of correction requests, whether or not it was valid or not, because so many people read it like the Bible. So there's always going to be, oh, you got this wrong. Why did you frame
Right.
this way? And if there was in the few times that there was an actual correction to be made, I would apologize and I would say, actually, I can't change that because newsletters are like print. In that,
Right.
once you send them out, you actually can't change them. You can change the web version,
Right.
but you can't change them, which I think is something unique, right? This is like old school. It's almost like a zine. You cannot change it. Once it's out there, it's out there.
Yeah, and it's a lot of responsibility too, that you make sure that you weigh in on every word before it goes out, so that you're responsible for that. So I love that. Yeah, thank you so much. Sorry, you're saying.
Well, one of the funniest stories is, it's only happened to me twice in the 6 years that I ran Billy Penn, but I would make a draft the day before, right? And as I'm building out the draft, and in the subject line, I would always build it by you clone the one from the previous day, you duplicate it, and I would put a placeholder into all the places where I was going to update it, including the subject line. So the subject line would always be like TK, TK. And only twice in 6 years did I send it out to 35,000 people with TK in the subject line. And it was great because that was two of the news, and it was years apart, but they got the highest response rate. Everybody emailing back.
People love it when people mess up. Yeah, for sure.
But a lot of people, it was funny because a lot of people had no idea what TK meant, because if you're not in the industry, in the news industry, you don't. It means to come, and it's TK because those were different letters, right? Just like lead, LEDE, is spelled differently. It's like, so you couldn't mistake it for one of the words. So TK. And but so many people were like, am I supposed to know what TK is? Like, they thought it was an inside joke or a Philly joke or something. They're like, what's TK? I missed it. What do you mean TK? It was really fun.
Yeah, that's an inside joke. Yeah, glad that you told about that anecdote. Yeah, awesome. But I know that you're launching in Louisiana. Is that right? As a new market. So one thing that I've always wondered, whenever media brands launch big local cohorts, right before you write your first newsletter, let's say you're launching in Louisiana, what do you tell your team that, this is what we keep in mind when you're launching into a new audience, which you don't have an idea about, which you're about to test out before you put out the first issue? So what does that room look like, and what advice do you give them? Just pause a minute, sorry. I am just connecting my charger. Hold on.
Go for it.
Ooh, saved in the nick of time. Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries.
Go ahead. Sorry.
We never launch in a new market, or I would never recommend launching in a new market without first doing discovery. So we do know a little bit about Louisiana. We've been spending the last 2 months doing outreach there and setting up phone conversations, virtual meetings with stakeholders in the community that we're trying to reach. So people in the innovation community, both funders and builders and startup founders and workforce development and university innovation centers. And we've been having conversations with them, getting to know the ecosystem. We build a source database, like just a spreadsheet where we start listing sources, people to know. Who are the people to know? And those are the people who are going to seed the newsletter, right? Because we've had these conversations. We said we're launching a newsletter. We'd like to sign up. So we have a fledgling list already, and we've had these started with these personal connections in advance. Nice. So that's before launching. I would not recommend launching anything without doing discovery first. It's like in a startup, it's like a go-to-market strategy. You do discovery first.
Right, and that becomes tribal knowledge for the team which is about to launch on the ground, yeah?
Absolutely. And then we seek out partnerships also. Like I said at the beginning, very collaborative about this. So I've also messaged 30 different news outlets in Louisiana and have some conversations set up with the editors. Maybe we'll collaborate on stories. We don't want to step on toes. Maybe you republish some of our work. Maybe we'll come onto your radio show or podcast. We want to work with creators too. Technically, is a big believer in the creator economy. The creators are a delivery pipeline for us. We just say, please take our story and do a social video about it. No gatekeeping here. This is where people are turning for news. So we see it as a pipeline. We're almost a wire service for creators and the chatbots, where people are going for news. So creators are going to be a big part of that strategy too.
Right. And, you touched upon partnerships, so I would want you to elaborate on that. I believe from the consumer end, there is no cost to subscribe to these newsletters, but you're largely funded by the ecosystem and the players in the ecosystem. So, would you mind touching upon what does a partner funded model look like for a newsletter?
In general, Technically's business model is relatively unique for an organization that's not public media. We are
Right.
mostly underwritten by other, institutions and nonprofits, place-based economic development orgs that want their region to be better known as a tech and startup hub. Will help underwrite, help fund our reporting and our newsletter in a specific region. Like public media underwriting, they're just giving us money to exist, right? They don't get to say,
Right.
you're going to report on this, you're going to feature these people. They don't read our stuff in advance, but they recognize that storytelling is not just an input. I mean, it's not just an output; it's an input. Storytelling is how a region gets known. Our stories, sometimes we cover we're a startup's first media hit, and then
Right.
6 months later they're in the newspaper, like the regular newspaper. So they recognize that nobody else is covering this stuff, and they want us to be there. So that is a funding model that we're building out. It's our post-pandemic funding model. It used to be events-based. We were kind of early in the events space,
Right.
and we're funded that way. And COVID put a stop to that, and we also recognized that, like newsletters, everyone's now doing events. So we don't need to be in that space. We partner with event hosts. They help us with our audience growth, because that's a big audience growth vehicle. So
Right.
we'll partner with them. But otherwise, we're mostly underwriting, some advertising. We still do some sponsored work, but it's mostly underwritten independent journalism that's then underwritten by institutions that want to support the type of reporting that we do.
Right. And you touch upon a great point, that one thing that I loved seeing on the Technically website is the ecosystem startup hub. And contrary to popular perception, people would think it's either SF or New York or DC or Boston, and more recently Austin. But you report throughout the country, and you get a realistic, I believe, real estate score, cost of living score, innovation score, and that's refreshing. A lot of people do equate startup hubs to be these 4 or 5 cities, so it's always good to see you throwing the light on cities which are growing, and you're able to build the ecosystem within that. But that actually brings us to a wrap. But this has been an incredibly insightful conversation, Danya, and I'm glad that you took away an hour of your time to be able to come and chat on the Let Us Stack podcast. I'm going to drop the links below for all the newsletters that we have talked about, and hopefully more people come up and sign up for these newsletters and stay updated on what's happening in that metro. Yeah. Thank you so much once again, and so glad to have you here. Yeah.
Thank you so
Take
much
care.
for having me.
Take care.